Hey, Rick, how you doing?
Good. Thanks, Randy.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us today. Good to have you. So, everybody, this is episode number 194 of Tech Sales Insights. Really happy to have Rick Hegberg with us today. Very accomplished legend within the semiconductor space, now entrepreneurial startup space. He's currently chairman of Aspinity and involved in a lot of different companies, different boards, which he will tell us more about. We have the title topic of startup companies' biggest issue, go to market. So certainly you can have the best technology in the world, but if you don't have revenue coming in, it just doesn't matter. For those that are members of the sales community, thank you. For those that are not, Tucker will throw up a link. You can get a free membership, salescommunity.com/winterfree. And today as a sponsor, we have ZoomInfo, who's the go-to-market platform sponsor of Sales Community. And you've actually used ZoomInfo over the years, right?
Yep, we have. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. Good stuff. They're mostly known for kind of the contact data aspect of things, but from a lot of our advisory board, CRO friends, got great offerings around account-based marketing. So think about being kind of better and less expensive than a 6 Sense or demand-based. Also a really cool AI product called Copilot, which basically does all great account research and information, tip of the finger, and really good info there. So anyway, so by way of introduction, Rick lives in Cape Cod in Brewster, is a more of a Wisconsin sports fan. So Packers and Milwaukee Bucks. And we're trying to figure out how we met. And we think it was through, although we've, I think, known of each other for a long time, through Brian Mooney connected us. And somehow we figured out we were both in Beaver Creek.
Right.
So we met and invested in Jetstream with you through that discussion, and then have been in touch since. So certainly has been great. And your amazing reputation around for what you've done in the semiconductor space, your aggressiveness, your go-to-market, your leadership skills, partnering, and a lot more, as we will hear from some of our mutual friends here. So John Byrne, who was recently president of Dell in the go-to-market side, says Rick is a legend in the semiconductor world, even very well known in Taiwan, where lots of the development happens. John said he would not be in corporate America if it was not for Rick. I guess you brought him into ATI when you tripped across him in the UK.
Right.
And, John says he would not have been at AMD and not at Dell if it was not for you. So huge kudos. And, John himself is extremely accomplished. And you are an amazing global road warrior. Henri Richard, who's was CRO, NetApp, and again, very, very accomplished, said Rick is a versatile executive with extensive and diverse experiences in the tech industry across products and services, as well as channels. He has led teams through mergers and acquisitions, has grown businesses several-fold, and participated in lots of successful exits. His customer centricity is exemplary, and his commitment to his work second to none. Rick Skurfield, who was NetApp, now CRO of Vast Data, says, I've worked with Rick for many years. He's one of the most intelligent and forward thinkers when it comes to strategic partnership. He also brings a wealth of experience to the table when talking about early entry into markets and industries around the world. Stephen DeFranco says, Rick has had a stellar career in the semiconductor industry, led sales organizations at ATI, AMD, Qualcomm, SanDisk, and NetApp. He's an active VC, led the acquisition of Vesper's IP to Qualcomm, and leads multiple startups. Rick is an example of an executive who sees the path to success with others, where others only see challenges. And then Ayman Abrahami, who is CEO of Protopia, we're both investors, says Rick has been an invaluable advisor to us from the very beginning. He's got a deep understanding of the compute and data infrastructure ecosystem, combined with his uncanny ability to connect startups with the right players at large companies. He has helped us navigate lots of critical partnerships. whether it's driving innovation at Vesper MEMS or leading Aspinity's cutting-edge advancements in analog machine learning. Rick brings the same clarity and decisive action to his work with us, ensuring that the potential of new technology is realized through impactful and symbiotic collaboration. So can't get much better than those, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're jumping into questions here. So you were Marquette, that's your Wisconsin roots in 82. What was your first job out of college?
So just while I was going into college, my dad was running a startup company. So I worked there like in high school, college a little bit. And when I got out of college, like people from our age, we didn't have a lot of money. So I took the highest paying job I could get, which is at Motorola Semiconductor. So I moved out to Phoenix, Arizona from Chicago. And, but the reason I bring it up, Brad, is, my core roots have been through my father, like a lot of us, right? And he was involved in because he started his own company. So I was at Motorola for, a handful of years. And then I got the itching to kind of do my first startup. So from there, I moved up to Boston, actually. And I was involved in a startup just right down the street from EMC on South Street in Hopkinton. So we were doing memory modules. It was a technology that came out of Wang. So I was employee number 10. I was the age of 27 when I kind of did my first startup at that point in time. But my first job out of school was at Motorola Semiconductor, which is in Phoenix, Arizona. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then you can briefly go through your impressive career from there.
Yeah. So that company was called Electronic Designs. It was a Tucker Anthony funded startup. So I got at a young age, got my first kind of stint at that. Bob Palmer, I don't know if you remember Bob Palmer from the day. Bob was running digital equipment, semiconductor business, and ultimately, took over from Ken Olson. Bob was on our board. So I got some exposure to some pretty, at the time, pretty significant players in the Boston area. We took the company from basically zero revenue to almost $100 million revenue. Sold the company. And then from there, I didn't want to go to the acquirer. So I ended up moving to California. And I went to work for another semiconductor company called VLSI Technology. And then from there, I've just been very fortunate to have been, I ran North America sales for VLSI. I got a general manager's job at VLSI at an early age. And then ultimately we moved back to East Coast as my daughter was born. We wanted to kind of get closer to family. So I took a job at Lucent Microelectronics, and bigger job, $3 billion of revenue under my responsibility. That was when Lucent was taking off in the whole comms market. This was, pre-2000. And then I did a few years at Lucent, and then again got itchy to do another startup. So I moved down to Raleigh, North Carolina, and I ran a startup company, sold that company. And then I got recruited into ATI Technologies, which is up in Markham. And Dave Orton, who was the CEO of ATI, was somebody that I used to sell to when I was at VLSI. And his company was acquired by ATI. So he was now the president of ATI. And that's when I got to know Henri Richard, because Henri was at AMD at the time. And we were partners because we would have a product that would fit onto an AMD platform. And so, long story short, kind of the interesting, funny story is that, we almost merged with NVIDIA when I was at ATI. ATI was in the graphics business. NVIDIA was in the graphics business, both doing GPUs. At the time, there was a desire for the two companies to come together. Unfortunately, it didn't happen for other reasons. And so it was interesting because Henri and I we're going to have dinner in Palo Alto and just meet. And I was talking to Dave Orton, who was the CEO at the time. of ATI, and he said, "Hey, I told him I'm meeting with with Henri," and he said, "Hey," he gave me a list of questions I asked Henri because we had heard a rumor that AMD was looking to buy a small competitor of ours. And I said, "Well, shit, why don't you just join us for dinner?" Right? I mean, why am I asking questions these are your questions? So he joined for dinner. As many of you know, Henri got on the phone immediately at dinner and he called the corp dev guy at AMD and, verified the rumor. And so that dinner led to AMD buying ATI. And so then we merged, we got acquired by ATI on a $5-something billion transaction. I worked with Henri for a little while. And I helped in the integration of putting the sales motion together between ATI and AMD, a very different motion. So we had to integrate that together. Then Henri decided to leave. He went to work at Freescale. So for a short period of time, I took his job. And then I decided to leave. And then I did another startup, which was a memory startup, which was a joint venture between STMicro and Intel. So I was brought in by Francisco Partners, which is a big private equity fund out of San Francisco. And I was responsible to really look at building the go-to-market for that company. This was before it was a real company because we were still working through the how we're going to put together. So taking the two sales forces, putting them together, again, back to how we were going to go to market, building a business plan. Then we launched the company. We got funded, we spun out. And then eventually that company was sold to Micron. And then I left Micron because I was redundant at that point in time. There was also a CRO at Micron at the point in time, Mark Adams. And then from there, I took a job at Aceros, which is another tech company in the Valley. And then we got acquired by Qualcomm. So again, being the sales leader, I was responsible to integrate the whole sales organizations between the two companies. So it's just, I've been through a number of acquisitions, a lot of economic value. And then I got reconnect with Henri at SanDisk. And we worked together there. And that was sold to Western Digital. And I, again, did the same thing, integrated, because Henri had left, went to NetApp. I stuck around, as I said, I kind of did the dirty work for him and kind of put that together. And then I joined him at NetApp for a period of time. And after NetApp, I went and did another startup in Boston, Vesper, which is a little MEMS company that we sold to Qualcomm. So I was the exec chairman and CEO of that. It was a good return for the investors, so that was a good outcome. And so, I've kind of got back to those core roots. Kind of started with early in my days, which is really, kind of areas that I've been really passionate about. It's really helping young companies go build value, and obviously helping shareholders build value. And so that's right now. That's where you and I met. We were talking about an investment in a company I was involved in, and from there, I'm now running. Basically two companies, one in Florida, one in Pittsburgh. And then I'm on the board, very involved with Protopia, like Amon mentioned, and a few other companies as well. So I'm involved in 6 companies right now, 2 actively involved with in terms of an operating role and 4 either in a board role or an advisory role. And then I also have a consulting business that I work with a couple of CEOs on. And one of them companies just had an exit. So he just sold his company to AMD back in August for $4.9 billion. So I helped advise that CEO on that deal. So it's been fun. It's been a good ride. That's for sure.
Yeah. Right. Really. Yeah. So getting into our title topic here, biggest issue for startup companies being go to market. Pretty obvious, but maybe tell us why you think that's the number one issue.
Well, I mean, most, in my opinion, most really good startups have a really good technology fabric, and a lot of good startups start with, it could either come out of academia. So today I'm involved with 3 academia startups. One came out of Princeton, one at University of Florida, one out of Carnegie Mellon. Typically very, very smart individuals, have thought through the problem, technically thought through the problem, but have no commercial experience and no go-to-market experience. And so what I've seen, and you've seen a little bit with one of our investments, is ability for a company to scale, which is not trivial for early stage companies. And typically, technology founders, in my opinion, they underestimate what it takes to scale a company. Mm-hmm. And so I don't really get involved in a company unless I have at least an idea of how that company is going to scale. Because if you can't figure it out pretty quickly, then you're burning a lot of capital. And so your ability to understand, have that vision of how you're going to get revenue, within a relatively short period of time, i.e. a year or two. And if you don't have a good game plan, I mean, many of us know on this call, capital's not cheap, right? I mean, that it can be very dilutive if you don't do it correctly. And so even companies that raise a lot of money, and it doesn't really matter, right? You've got to have a really good path to revenue. And in my opinion, that's why a lot of companies fail. It's not because they don't have good technology. It's just they don't understand how they're going to generate sustainable revenue, right? They could do one deal, but you have to have ability to create sustainable revenue. And that's the deal.
Absolutely. So before you think about being able to scale, I'm sure when you first go in, you say, okay, is there really something there? And usually a key consideration is, product market fit. How do you think about that? How do you think about that?
Well, the key is what is the ultimate value proposition? What is the client value proposition? And it's got to pop really fast, right? And it's got to be super clear in terms of what. And if that story is complicated to tell, that's going to be a tough one, right? And so when I do my assessment, I mean, that's what I try to understand really fast. Is it's got to be a very clear customer value prop, and ultimately it's got to have economic value to the client as well. So and that's what I look at right away. And then from there, you can kind of build your story. You can build your game plan around that, which is your basic 4 Ps of how we all think about going to market. But if you don't have that core right away, you can't. It's hard to design that, right? It's got to be pretty clear pretty early. That's when I assessed companies, because like many of us, we get tasked to go look at a lot of early stage companies, and that's really where I put my energy is around that. Because many of us have been in startups that it just takes a long time to figure that out. Chances are you probably missed a market opportunity.
Yep, absolutely. And then from the kind of perspective, I'll say the early sales calls, what are your feelings around kind of the importance of CEO-led sales versus kind of hiring your first rep? And is that first rep, kind of a rep? Is that a player coach? Is it somebody who is going to be the sales manager? How do you think about that?
Well, I mean, my background is more go to market than obviously the technical side. So I'll typically be involved in the first customer activity. So that's an area that I'll put my energy on more so than more on the technical side of things. But I mean, you've got to have player coaches. I mean, you're not, at least I don't look at hierarchy in early stage companies. I mean, we have to have everybody that has to wear multiple hats as well. And then truthfully, the key is also for me is you've got to early on understand your ecosystem, because it's hard to scale with these early stage companies by yourself. I mean, you've got to understand who your partners are, who's going to carry the message with you, where do you fit into that ecosystem. And I mean, that's part of kind of an early path. And the companies I'm involved with right now is we go to market together, right? We find those partners. There's got to be a win-win on both sides associated with why they want to work with us. We got to bring value to them as well, both to their sellers and to their business unit leaders. So, I mean, if you can find that fit as an early stage company where you have a go-to-market partner that they're economically motivated to work with you, then you've got something. But it's hard to do it on your own, as we all know, very hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
And expensive. Yeah.
And then what about trying to figure out kind of that kind of, I'll say the ideal customer profile, the target audience, kind of, who are you best suited for around that product fit, around that value prop?
Well, I mean, just experience right now is, the two companies that I'm very actively involved in have a very diverse set of customers, potential customers. For example, my Florida-based company is a software company. Our main audience is companies that are designing SoCs or chips. So companies like NVIDIA, Intel, AMD would be customer of ours. And those are the ones that you want to go sell to, right? That's the natural affinity. The big whales. I want to go land a big whale, but it could be very damaging as well. So I think you've got to also pick the right set of customers that you want to learn with, because early stage companies, your chances are you're going to have some challenges with your technology. You're going to have issues with stuff. So you have to identify those customers that are willing to work with you, that, because it may not be perfect what you deploy. And so profiling that set of customers that really are going to be friendly, that really appreciate the technology, are going to be important. So I think that's always a balance here, which is, do you want to go win the big whale that could really change the economic value of the company? Or do you want to focus on some of the smaller customers that, that may not necessarily change the knob of revenue, but are good teaching customers for you? And, frankly, the venture world, as many of us know, they look at both, right? They look for, they want you to have some customer success,
right,
but they want you to, they want to see how do you scale to the folks that are going to provide real economic change to your company. So there's that balance that you got to find. And so, my software company in Florida, our solution is so attractive. The big guys are very interested in it, but time will tell if that's the right that's the right path for us. Versus the other companies I'm involved in, we tend to focus on some of the longer tail customers that, frankly, they're going to be a little more forgiving for us, if you know what I mean, at this stage. Okay.
Absolutely. So it's okay to go kind of elephant or whale hunting, but at the same time, it's good just to get some wins with some smaller companies as well.
I think so. Especially when you're, like in our case, we're one's a Series A, one's a C company. I mean, frankly, just getting any customer momentum is super helpful at this stage of the game. Yeah,
absolutely. And then how do you think of kind of early lead generation around? Obviously, you could spend money on marketing, but usually there's probably not going to be that much money there. Going to people that doing just kind of old school cold calling reach outs. How do you think about that?
Well, again, I think what we've tried to look at is what are the different platforms when you can get the best reach, the most cost-effective platforms. And as you know, Randy, there's a lot of different types of platforms out there that you can work with, right? And so, depending what industry you're in, there's a very different type of platforms. So, we try to use our website a lot, right? There's that, that is a good means of at least a connection point between also showing off your technology through some means through your website is also important. We're trying to use LinkedIn Navigator a lot, right? Profiling those customers, identifying those individuals within those customers using that particular tool. One of my startups were using HubSpot. The other one is using Salesforce as part of our demand gen. We're really focused on content. Good content that's interactive content is really important at an early stage company, where you actually show your value prop very, very simply. So we're trying to do a lot of social as well. So a lot of things that are relatively inexpensive at this stage in the game is important. But, again, you got to identify that audience. Who is the right audience? We've got my one company is, we as a very it's a very unique audience. So you've got to understand that audience. We got to curate that audience. We got to get to those individuals, and we got to find different means to go do that. And it could be through podcasts like you're doing here, to different sorts of social medias, to attending different type of conferences. I don't know if there's a perfect answer, but you got to try them all, truthfully, in my opinion. But, I think we're trying. And also, have really smart people that understand this as well. I'm not a social marketing expert, but identifying people that can help you in those areas is also very important as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And then, don't know, but kind of just from a base, just thinking of ZoomInfo as our sponsor today, right? But even just as a basic contacts, kind of who's who in the zoo at the different companies. So some of your companies probably use ZoomInfo as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
And then
curating that, really understanding your sales audience, who the clients are, the meaningful clients, and giving them information that's actionable, that they're going to want to have a call with you, right? As we all know, we get bombarded with stuff, right? You got to be able to present them with information that is going to be meaningful when you do get that 30 minutes with them. You can turn it into something actionable. And so, you don't want to waste their time, right? So we spend a lot of time in both of this company making sure that whatever we curate is going to be meaningful for those clients.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And then on the kind of channel kind of partnership side, right? I see a lot of companies say, oh, well, we're going to go, partner with so-and-so and they're going to go take care of it. But, my feedback usually is, hey, you got to be driving those first early 10, 20 customers. Somebody else may make an intro, but you can't rely on anybody else to carry the sales cycle.
Absolutely. One of our investments together, that was the flaw, right? That's one of the reasons why I'm not that involved with that particular company, is because the founders just believed that big CSP was just going to go carry the message. Well, as we all know, that's not going to happen.
Right.
First of all, if they're not going to get paid on it, there's no reason for them to promote it. And so you've got to go do that work, right? And you've got to go create that. They're not, even though they look sexy as a channel provider or a channel enabler, but they're really, truthfully, until you get more embedded into their offering and it becomes, they see economic value in promoting and your product, then they're not going to get a lot of value on that. So you got to do the heavy lifting yourself. Otherwise, and again, that's where a lot of companies just assume that their partner's going to run with it, but that doesn't really typically work. Eventually, if you do your job, they will.
Right.
And that's,
totally.
Absolutely.
And I should have mentioned before, so anybody that is watching or listening, feel free to chime in with any comments or questions here as well. And we got Tucker, as always, behind the scenes. Thanks for your help, Tucker, and he'll pull them up for us. And then, there's obviously lots of metrics, lots of KPIs. But if you think about it kind of from a go-to-market perspective, early on, maybe the first, 6 months or so, kind of what are some of those key metrics for you?
Well, early stage companies, it's just, man, you just want to get some wins, right? That's, and again, I don't get too hung up on, obviously as you get bigger, then obviously you've got to have, all the right metrics depending what industry you're in. But man, early stage companies, you just got to get your wins under your belt, right? That's the key thing. You also, that those first customer acquisitions tend to be expensive because you spend a lot of time. So you want to make sure that they're repeatable. So if you're selling any software, right, which is a licensing software, you want to make sure that it's going to be pretty sticky. So you don't have to go spend a lot of time and going through that refresh cycle. So that's the other key area is, those first engagements that you really want them to be sticky engagements. Otherwise, it's a lot of money, right? A lot of time, a lot of money, and it likely probably not a lot of revenue that comes out of those first deals. So to me, those are the most important. They've got to be they may not be massive in size, but they've got to be strategic. and you've got to look at it from a multi-year engagement standpoint. Otherwise, it's hard.
Yeah, totally. And then what about any, if there's kind of 2 or 3 things you'd say are not priorities, right? Where do you see people kind of wasting their time that they should not be prioritizing?
That's a good question. I would think, well, I mean, I don't know if this is exactly answer your question. I mean, first of all, I'm not in the hierarchy in any company, right? So, I mean,
All hands on deck.
all hands on deck, right? So whatever it takes to get a deal done, right? So, if I got to get involved in whatever level to win that deal, so be it. Even in my capacity, it doesn't matter, right? If the founder of the company who may be not that involved with the company more, it needs to get involved, so be it, right? So I think the thing I spend no time on is be concerned about titles, responsibilities, about what does it take to get a deal done. And I think a lot of early stage companies, a lot of the founders or whatever say, well, that's not my job. Well, that just doesn't work at all.
Right.
So, I mean, you got to make sure that's the case. And I think just you got to get rid of the bullshit, right? I mean, you can't run an early stage company and have a lot of nonsense going on. So I try to very quickly eliminate the bullshit, right? Because if you got that in your company, that's a cancer. You got to get rid of it really fast. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then some things I see is kind of, I'll say, loose spending on kind of the marketing side that may not deliver short-term results. Focus on, hey, let's do our branding. I'll say, well, who cares about branding? You just got to worry about kind of getting deals in, and then unrelated to go to market, but it impacts the spend. Is on the engineering team trying to get to perfect as opposed to good enough, right? If it's good enough, then you can sell stuff. Then you're going to get the money coming in. You can kind of work on that eventual roadmap. A lot of times the engineers are kind of too driven on, well, this is really what the customer wants and needs. I know best. Well, they're saying something else and it's good enough. So let's lock and load and go.
Right. No, that's another good one. Truthfully, is MVP. Right. You've got to have a clear sight to what that minimal viable product or minimal viable solution is. And because at least my history is, the engineering, again, most of these startups typically have a very strong engineering team. And back to your point, is they want to make it perfect. And perfect doesn't necessarily is not the right answer. And it may take too long to get perfect. Right. So really homing in on an MVP is very, very important.
Yeah.
Early on.
Yeah, absolutely. What about from kind of sales pet peeves perspective? Any kind of 1 or 2 things that just kind of really piss you off?
Well, it's interesting, and I got a little bit of this. I think early on is I want to align myself with. The compensation always is an issue, a challenge, right? So you want to align compensation, especially in the sales organization, not transactional compensation or as your early stage company, but how are you actually helping build value for the company, right? And so,
right.
If you've got a seller that's very focused on that transaction, how much money you put in the pocket versus how much money, how's it helping the company? Truthfully, that's a little bit of one of my pet peeves, right? So the balance of how you compensate. So what we'll typically do is on certain wins, we'll give them more equity. We may not necessarily give them a lot of dollars for that deal, but we're going to give them more equity because that is probably longer term a better value for them. And so, just finding that right balance, because as we all know in sales, and what you want is you want a sales force that's financially motivated, but you want a sales force that's not sucking all the profits out of the company, but also is willing to take a bigger equity stake in the company. So that's at least in the purview of what we're talking about here, that's one of my bigger pet peeves.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as the companies do start to kind of grow and scale, how do you think about just basic kind of sales training?
What do you mean by that?
Well, just ongoing, sales training to make sure you've got the right kind of processes. People have the sales methodology. Ongoing because everybody kind of comes in young or old with kind of different levels of skill sets.
Well, I mean, we do that now, even if you're not in the sales organization, because and both of the companies I'm involved in, multiple people are involved in the sales process. I'm involved in the sales process. You could have the CTO involved in the sales process. You could have the sales. So we actually, before we even do a presentation, we're actually, we go through that. We simulate that meeting, right? These meetings are super important. So we don't handle anything casually. So I want to make sure everybody is on point, right? And so, and then obviously the sales teams that are involved, the people that are involved in sales, and they may not even be in our world real salespeople, but they're actually doing sales work for us. We spend a lot of time on just making sure, we do a video review, right? We look at how they present. We coach them on their presentation skills because a lot of our meetings are virtual meetings, right? So we spend a lot of time making sure that individual is articulate, they get their message across. There's just basic communication skills that, especially when you get engineers that are a big part of your sales force, that's not their skill set. So we spend a lot of time in working with them around that because that is those first meetings are super important. So, we go for across the board, Randy, on a lot of areas. So not just kind of traditional stuff that you and I would think about, but just, how are you coming across in a meeting? Did you get the point across?
Yeah.
How's that deck curated? Are we getting the message across soon enough? Should we move the impact slides earlier in that deck? We look at a lot of that stuff. I don't take anything for granted because you could blow a meeting and that could be it, right? That could be one bad meeting and that's done, right? So I'm trying to be very responsible early on in these engagements. So you got to make sure everybody is capable of presenting. And some of them don't really want to be on these calls. It doesn't matter. They've got to be ready. Period in a story. It's super important.
Absolutely, yeah. Importance of making sure the sales training not just for sales, but the non-sales engineers and others. And then, what about as you're scaling the importance of really bringing in the right talent? How do you think about that?
Well, that's hard, right? Especially, first of all, I typically like to bring in a couple of people that I could trust, that I've worked with in the past. So those tend to be my first hires into a sales force. Is kind of a known commodity that especially in an early stage company, that first couple of hires, you got to have a lot of trust in that individual because they're going to carry a lot of weight at what happens with the company. And then you look at the different mixture of talent that you need, right? You've got your technical community that you've got to go create. Where do you want to create that community? Is that going to be in India? Is it going to be in the US? Where is that going to be? Then you look at your sales force, again, where your customers are. Then obviously what we've been looking at is how do we recruit some younger talent into the company? So create that balance. So assume we got that really seasoned leader. And then how do we look at some of the younger talent? So can we identify folks out of university that have got a technical background, a good domain knowledge and business background? How do we get them motivated? So the first typical hires is that seasoned leader, that's somebody that you have a confidence with, and then it's creating a balance of that kind of that younger talent that you've got to look at. And so right now, we're pretty active in some of the universities, truthfully. So my Florida company is down. We're connected to University of Florida. The guys out of Princeton, that's not necessarily an area that we're going to typically recruit from, but we're kind of looking at other universities that we want to look at. So that's kind of the current model that we're looking at. Because a lot of the sellers they're basically doing, it's over the phone. We're not, the old days, in-person meetings. Not that they've gone away, but that's in an early stage company. That's less of the path where you make the impact. The bigger impact is these type of meetings that we're doing right now.
Yeah,
which is all virtual.
Yeah,
that's where you get the best bang for the buck, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
right.
Time flies when you're having fun. So amazing, just so much wisdom here. Really, really appreciate it. For people that have known me a bit, I always like to ask if there's, I don't know if you have anything, but any PG Randy story.
Well, yeah. So, I don't. You remember? So we met for the first time in Beaver Creek, right? And so through a kind of a mutual friend of ours, Brian Mooney, because Brian, who's a consummate salesperson, said, "Hey, you got to meet Randy." And I've known of you for a long time, but we had never met. And so we kind of connected via text. And so we said, "Let's meet at the bar at the Ritz." So you had to go from your side of Beaver over to Arrowhead area or back to the outside, and you're sitting at the bar, describing yourself. This is who I am. I'm sitting at this location of the bar. And then we had a great conversation. And if you remember, that was about, I was thinking about starting a venture group, and I was trying to see if you would be interested in participating. And I'll never forget, you said, your wife is saying, "Where are you going?" And I don't know. I'm going over to the Ritz to go see some guy I don't even know. And I don't know why, but he sounds interesting, so I'm going to go meet him. So that was our first time, and then from there, the rest is history. So it's been great to know you. Yeah,
definitely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, we got a couple mutual companies going now with Protopia and Jetstream, and hopefully we got some others. So
absolutely.
Anyway, you've been fantastic. Appreciate it. Tucker, as always, thanks for your help behind the scenes. Zoom Info, thanks for your sponsorship. And again, for those that are members of the sales community, thanks. For those that are not, you can go ahead and join with the link that Tucker threw up. So everybody have a great rest of the week, and hopefully you stay warm.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Randy.